Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We will go ahead and get started at the top of the hour, so just hang tight. We'll allow our fellow participants a few more minutes to join before we get started here with this afternoon's webinar. Good afternoon, everyone. And again, thank you for joining. We're going to get started at the top of the hour, so just another moment or two to allow our fellow attendees to join into the webinar. You can join us two ways. One is via the webinar Zoom link, or you can actually join us on our Intertribal Agriculture Council Facebook page live stream. We'll begin this afternoon's webinar in just a few more minutes. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for a discussion with USDA on the future of meat and poultry processing in the United States. We are really excited to be joined today by Mr. Marty Matlock and his colleagues. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. If at any point you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A feature or the chat box. We will be monitoring those throughout today's discussion, and we will make sure to elevate those questions for discussion prior to the conclusion of today's webinar. Again, you can use the chat or the Q&A feature. With that, I am going to go ahead and pass it on over to Marty Matlock and allow him to introduce his colleagues from the USDA.
Thank you so much, Kelsey, and thank you to the Intertribal Agriculture Council for hosting us for this discussion about the future of meat and poultry processing in the United States. This is an important time, an important opportunity. We'll go ahead and advance to the next slide. We have with us Dr. Karama Neal, Dr. Dwayne Goldman, and Dwayne said he wanted to come and listen, and I'm kind of putting him on the spot here, but so he's probably driving between some farm to another doing his job, but and may not be able to join us by video, but he's on as well. And then me, Marty Matlock. Oh, there he is. There's Dr. Goldman. You're sitting in a chair and not in the cab of your pickup for a change. So I'll introduce myself and then I'll pass it on to Dr. Neal and Dr. Goldman. I'm Marty Matlock. I'm Senior Advisor for Food Systems Resiliency with Marketing and Regulatory Programs. Dr. Neal.
Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. I'm Karama Neal. I am the Administrator for Rural Business Cooperative Service, or one of the 3 agencies of the Rural Development Mission Area at USDA. And I'll pass it to my colleague, Dr. Goldman.
Thank you, Dr. Neal. Dwayne Goldman, Senior Advisor for Racial Justice and Equity here at the department, and I'm glad to be listening in, looking to learn a lot.
We're thrilled to have you on board, and so please do, if you see an opportunity, you have any questions, speak up. And for those of you, those guests who've joined us, if you have questions, please put them in the chat so we can get to them at the end. We've got a brief presentation. I will say you have the A team with you here. By A team, I mean the Arkansas team, because all 3 of us are currently in Arkansas or from Arkansas. Dwayne Goldman is a proud Razorback like me. And Dr. Neal has spent her life helping and working with Arkansans as well as others in the region. So next slide, please. You're in good hands, is what I'm trying to say. Next slide, please. We have
just one second, technical.
Okay. You lost the mouse, didn't you? That's usually what happens to me. The mouse fell behind something. Yeah. Well, while we're waiting, what I will tell you is that one of the challenges we know we face with meat and poultry processing in the United States is that it's not just the processing that matters. The processing sits in the middle of the supply chain. So when there's a problem with meat and poultry processing, it affects consumers, of course. We saw that with the pandemic. We saw the prices of virtually all animal proteins go up and animal products go up. But it also dramatically impacts the producers, because producers operate on a calendar and those animals have to get to market. And if those animals don't get to market, you either keep and feed them or you euthanize them. That's your only 2 options. They can't just stop. And so those are catastrophic decisions economically and frankly, spiritually. So trying to figure out how to remove that barrier is what we're all about. This is not, this is about expanding our capacity in rural America to make sure that the meat and protein supply chain is dynamic and resilient. Next slide, please. So the Biden administration and USDA under Secretary Vilsack have invested $1 billion to increase competitiveness in meat and poultry processing. We know that there are some funds that are already available, and Dr. Neal will touch on those a little bit. Meat and poultry inspection readiness grants have gone out already. $32 million were awarded to cover the cost to bring programs into federal grant of inspection status. Funding for round 2 of that is coming. And then we also have reduced overtime and holiday inspection costs for small and very small processing programs. That's open now for and still available for application. And then the food supply chain guaranteed loans, which is being run out of Dr. Neal's shop, is also available, $100 million across the food supply chain. And she'll talk a little bit about that. So I'm going to hand the ball over to, bounce the ball to Dr. Neal now to jump into some of the sort of essence, the mechanics of the programs that we are moving this $1 billion down the road to fund. Dr. Neal.
Thank you. As we're waiting for the next slide, I'll just say that the program I'm focused on right now is the Food Supply Chain Guaranteed Loan Program. It's important to recognize this is part of a suite of programs. Dr. Matlock mentioned some of those, alluded to some of those, and you'll see more about those in some of our websites as well. But this is one of the programs that we have that's launched, and because it's open, it's available, it's ready to go. We wanted to make sure that you all knew about it and had a chance to answer questions. So to ask any questions. So again, the Food Supply Chain Guaranteed Loan Program, as Dr. Matlock mentioned, will use $100 million of American Rescue Act funds to provide approximately $1.4 billion in loan guarantees to commercial lenders. We will facilitate finance, these loans will facilitate financing for qualified borrowers and projects and activities in the middle of the food supply chain. So as we talked, when Dr. Matlock talked about some of the constrictions and some of the places where there are vulnerabilities, those are typically at the middle of the food supply chain. It's not as much on the production side, not as much, although some issues, not as much on the retail or institutional purchase side, but in the middle. And we say middle, we're talking about aggregation, processing, manufacturing, storage, transportation, wholesaling, or distribution of food. This is food writ large. And so this is a pretty wide, broad availability with regard to food. Again, the purpose here is to increase capacity and help create a more resilient, diverse, and secure U.S. food supply chain. Next slide, please. So the loan, how does this work? This is a guaranteed loan. The loan is made by a lender. Both the borrowers and the guarantors are responsible for repaying the loan. The loan must meet the requirements of the Food Supply Chain Guaranteed Loan Program notice and the lender's underwriting standards. That's just important. It's important to note that the lender has to decide that they want to make this loan first, and then it comes to us for the application application for the guarantee. USDA guarantees a certain proportion of the loan, and that's of course supported by the full faith and credit of the United States. The key thing I want to mention here is that the relationship here, the primary relationship, is between the agency, in this case, the Rural Business Cooperative Service, and the lender. So if there are producers on board, we absolutely want you to know about this. That's why we're excited to do this program, this webinar. We want you to know about this. We want you to be able to bring it to your lender and say, you know, we learned about this. We want to know if you're involved or engaged. If you are a lender, obviously we want you to be involved and engaged as well. And we'll make sure that you have links. Both have this slide deck presentation, and we can share some links in the chat as well to make sure that you have information on how to do that. So again, when we say lenders, want to make sure we're clear as well. That's not just banks. That's banks, it's credit unions, it's loan funds, CDFI loan funds. Pretty much any lender is able to participate. There may be some differences based on whether that lender is supervised by the federal government, like a bank or a credit union, or is not supervised, like a loan fund. But we certainly welcome all lenders to participate there. So the key message is, if you're a potential borrower, then talk to your lender about this program, share this information so that you can hopefully participate. Next slide, please. So you can see here the notice. This program launched on December 9th of last year. The website is listed there as well. Again, I encourage you to visit it, learn more about the program, and see what kinds of opportunities there might be for you. When you go to this website, you will find there not only just the documents about the program and detailed information about how to engage with it. You'll also see videos, their training sessions, really everything that you need to know if you are a lender to apply to the program. And if you're a borrower, to direct your lender to this website so that they can apply on your behalf. Next slide, please. So a couple of things I want to highlight here when we think about eligible borrowers. We again tried to be very broad here because we recognize that there are a number of different types of entities that might either be involved in the food supply chain or want to become involved in the food supply chain in the middle portion of that. So these can be eligible borrowers, include for-profits, nonprofits, tribes, federal, state tribes that are recognized by federal state on a reservation, other federally recognized tribal groups, public bodies, or even individuals. Again, you can see some of the details here about the types of entities that are eligible to borrow through this. When they're working with food, they do need to be inspected to make sure that it's good, but that would be something that would be standard anyway. And so you'll see here listed that. Again, the key piece here is that we're trying to be very broad in who's allowed to participate. One particular group I would raise up that is eligible is cooperatives. We want to make sure that cooperatives, if they are formed to be engaged in any of this work, they can participate as well. And there are guidelines to how to do that in the notice. Next slide, please. So we've talked about eligible borrowers a bit. Let's talk about eligible uses of the loan funds. Again, we're focused on the middle of the food supply chain. And so you can see some of the listing there. We talked about those before, everything from aggregation to storage to wholesaling and distribution, everything in the middle there. And a variety, again, of potential uses of funds. So it could be purchase and development of land. It could be startup costs, working capital, machinery, equipment, a variety of things, again, looking at increasing capacity. So we want to be able to tie whatever it is you're using those loan proceeds for to actually increasing capacity. That's what the overall goal is. A couple of things, again, I would lift up here is that up to 50% of the loan proceeds can be used to refinance existing debt. So we want to make sure that that's known. We can't go over 50%, but up to 50% can be used for that purpose. Again, highlighting that cooperatives can be involved and also highlighting that new markets tax credit structures can be engaged in this program. If you have particular questions on this, we'd very much encourage you to reach out. And again, I'll put the information in the chat and also be in this slide deck as well, so that you can reach out about questions if you have questions that require a little bit more technical detail than we have time to go into here. Next slide, please. So loan rates, amounts, terms, the maximum loan size in this program is $40 million. There is no minimum. And we're, again, very intentional about that. We recognize that there may be smaller loans that are projects that are interested in this program. We want to welcome those as well. The guarantee, we think, is hopefully pretty attractive. We can provide, if the borrower is offering a fixed interest rate for the life of the loan at no greater than Wall Street Journal Prime plus 200 basis points, and they get a 90% guarantee on this loan. So that is something we hope that will be attractive, again, that will facilitate access to capital for the processors, for the other entities in the middle of the food supply chain that might be interested in this program. If the rate is not fixed for life or does not meet that Wall Street Journal Prime plus 200 basis points, then the guarantee is at an 80% guarantee, still relatively attractive. Interest rates are negotiated by the lender and the borrower. So again, this is something where you get together with your lender first. If you're a producer, if you're someone who's a business that's in the food supply chain, get together with the lender first, negotiate those rates, those terms. The lender brings that then to the agency for consideration for the guarantee. Loan terms may not exceed 40 years. We don't expect to have a ton that are going to be that long, but if they are, that is an option. One thing I'll mention too before we go to the next slide is that if you have questions about a particular project that you're interested in or considering whether or not that project might be a fit for this program, we very much encourage you to submit an eligibility determination letter that would allow you to sort of lay out some of the brief details of the project, see if it's a fit, see where you might be able to push or pull in a particular way to make it be a fit before going through the entire application process. And again, I'll put this in the chat, but RD Food Supply Chain Loans at USDA.gov is the email address that goes to. We have one person who fills all those questions or make sure that the answers get distributed and are consistent, and we'll make sure that you get an answer on that. Next slide, please. So again, we have enough funds to fund $1.4 billion in loan guarantees. 19% of these funds are reserved until June 7th of this year for entities that establish and facilitate the slaughter and initial processing of meat and poultry. So this is where this food supply chain guaranteed loan program ties into the larger action plan, the administration's action plan on creating a fairer, more competitive, more resilient meat and poultry supply chain. I should say that, again, while these 19% of funds are reserved until June 7th, that does not mean that meat and poultry processors only have until June 7th. It just means those funds are reserved until June 7th. We welcome meat and poultry processing projects throughout the life of this program until the funds are expended. So I think those are the main. Oh, another thing I wanted to mention here in particular is that this is open to projects regardless of geography. People might look at our name in the Rural Business Cooperative Service. We're part of rural development. We think we only serve rural areas. Most of our programs, that is true. But in this case, it is not. And so these projects in all areas, rural, urban, suburban, wherever, are eligible to participate with no geographic restrictions. Next slide, please. So again, I'll share the website. You see it before you here. Again, there's a ton of information there. We keep it updated as we get new questions or start seeing themes. We'll put those in the FAQs. You'll see information there on how to enroll as a lender. If you're a lender or you want your lender to become enrolled in this program, you'll see information there on how to do that. There's a video on that website that talks about how to enroll as a lender if it's a loan fund, like a CDFI loan fund or other type of loan fund. That might be useful as well. And also various events where we've talked about this program. Again, you can see those as well. Many talking about the same things we're talking about here, but if you want a refresher, that would be available as well. Part of what, and if there are lenders on the call or there's others who are in touch with lenders, applying for and getting engaged in the Food Supply Chain Guaranteed Loan Program also makes you eligible for the other guaranteed loan programs at Rural Development. I encourage you to visit rd.usda.gov/1RD guarantee to learn more about our other guaranteed loan programs. The last website here is a critical one. This is usda.gov/meet. This is where all the programs that Dr. Matlock opened with, including the one that I've spent the most time on just now, are listed. And it's important because it includes all of those programs, not just the ones we've talked about, but many others, and gives you an opportunity to sign up for updates. So as we are launching and developing new programs, we're in the midst of that right now. I just came off of another meeting. We were talking about another program we're hoping to launch very, very soon. As these new programs are launched, you can sign up for updates at usda.gov/meet to get additional information so that when that program launches, you're the first one to know about it and you can be ready to use it if it meets your needs. The other thing I would say too is that website is continually updated. So as new information becomes available on different programs, you can see that information there. Of course, you can go find it there. You can also sign up for updates and be updated that way as well. So I encourage you to visit usda.gov/meet. I think the other thing I would say too is it does a nice job of sharing the why. Many of us know the why. That's why you're on this call. You understand the why. This is what Marty talked about. But so I find it is helpful to see that and wanted to share that is there as well. Next slide, please. I think this is when I turn it over to you, Marty.
Thank you, Karama.
Go right ahead.
Yes, that is. So this is sort of our summary wrap-up slide. We didn't want to come and talk to you the whole time. We wanted to just give you the framework, and then we want to listen to you. So that's our goal. We have a relatively small group relative to a lot of the webinars we do, which is a good thing. It means plenty of time for people to get their questions together, to think about what you want to know and ask us. And I want to make it clear that you're not limited to this. We're the United States Department of Agriculture. We're always accessible and available to answer questions. You can find me at marty.matlock@usda.gov. Send me an email and I'll be happy to help out. Kelsey knows how to get a hold of us as well. And I can tell you what I generally will end up doing is asking Karama what the answer to the question is. So that's the way these programs work. So we've got $1 billion total, 800 million in additional investment that's rolling out the door. When we say soon, I mean, that's imminent. Phase 1 gap financing is going to be spring of 2022. Secretary Vilsack he brought on his team to do this work fast, starting a year ago. And so this is how fast this has moved from concept through implementation. And I'm not a lifer federal employee, so I'm learning a lot in this new gig I'm in as a senior advisor. And what I'm learning is just how hard it is to spend federal dollars. But the value of this for producers is incredible. We haven't spent this much money on meat and poultry processing innovations, maybe ever. So this is a once in a lifetime, once in a career opportunity for you to engage and get support from the federal government to achieve our common goals. Gap financing grants are for projects with greatest near-term impact. That doesn't just mean big. We expect to have a portfolio of applications, and we expect to have small, very small, mid-sized applicants applying And so this is not just, this phase one is not just for the bigger of the mid-size facilities. Certainly those are part of the eligible funding portfolio, the larger mid-size, but we're also very interested in the small and very small facilities. Phase two will be additional financing and assistance grants, which will have a much larger reach, because they will engage in processors who haven't really broken ground yet. So those are for the new folks who are trying to get into the business, and then programs are trying to stand up. So those will be coming in the summer. The intermediary lending programs you've heard about already. Some will have more this summer. So grants and loans. We understand that workforce development is critical, that it's not just about having workers available, though that's pretty darn important, but it's also about making sure those workers are ready to work, because this is complicated, dangerous, hard work. And the sort of training that can be provided makes those employees productive on the job early, day one perhaps, and that allows the facility, the enterprise, to actually start generating revenues and profits faster. So, and then there's the resilience part of it. It's not just about the workers you hire today, it's about the workers you're going to hire in 10 years. So we need to understand that that workforce development is going to be a constant challenge in all of our rural communities. We're not just trying to make meat here, folks. We're trying to enhance rural prosperity. Then innovation and technical assistance also represent a significant portion of this investment, roughly half and half between innovation and technical assistance. Innovation is research into automation and other technologies that can be utilized. Those are to increase the competitiveness of small facilities and mid-sized facilities. And then technical assistance, we anticipate, will be for everything from how to apply for the program and how to get your financial stack organized, and how to have all the way through to how to find people to help you be HACCP certified. So we understand that technical assistance is broad. It's as broad as the supply chain engagement. So with that, I think we have one more slide, which is just to remind you where to go to find information, usda.gov/meet. And we will be happy to entertain your questions, because that's really why we are here.
Thank you all so much. One question that come in is if you could just go ahead and give another rundown on if native CDFIs qualify to be a guaranteed lender through these programs.
Absolutely. All lenders. Very intentional. I come from a CDFI background myself, so very much want to be intentional about including native CDFIs, whether they are CDFI loan funds, CDFI banks, CDFI credit unions. Very much welcome all of those lenders to be engaged in these programs. I will say specifically for that question, if these are CDFI loan funds, nonprofit loan funds that are non-depository, we'd encourage you to visit the food supply chain website that I can stick in there again, because on that you will find a link to how non-regulated lenders can participate. There are a couple extra steps that we have to go through for non-regulated lenders because they're not supervised like a banker or credit union is, but it is absolutely feasible. It's absolutely doable. We welcome that engagement and welcome that participation. Doing it through this these food-related programs now, again, opens up for the guarantee programs, opens it up for all of our guarantee programs at Rural Development. So again, very, very much welcome that. That's water, that's larger business and industry, rural business and industry, community facilities, and just a variety of programs, Rural Energy for America program, just a number of things where we have guaranteed loan programs where once you get in, you're in. So we very much welcome that.
Thank you so much for that. As a reminder, if there are any additional questions, you can go ahead and utilize either the Q&A feature, or you can drop them directly to us in the chat, and I will make sure to mention them. If you are joining us from Facebook Live, you can comment on the live stream, and we will also pull those questions over into the webinar discussion. I have another question that came in that says, will a mobile processing plant qualify as infrastructure for these particular programs?
Yeah, so it's a good question. We, again, want to be as broad as we can wherever we can. And so with regard, for example, to the food supply chain guaranteed, if it's relating to food and there's increasing capacity, we can think about how that could work. That seems like something that would qualify on the surface. I don't know if the infrastructure piece was intentional there. This is not something that is tied to, for example, the infrastructure bill or that kind of thing. So I don't know that that's really critical, whether it's defined as infrastructure or not. But certainly in the context of the food supply chain guaranteed loan program, in general, that is something that would be eligible. And if there is, as we're developing new programs, as I mentioned, this is one of a suite of programs, many of which have not yet come online. As we're developing new programs, we will keep those kinds of things in mind as well. And so encourage you as those programs are released to look at the details to determine whether there's eligibility there or not. But know that it is something we're absolutely thinking about.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. There's one question, if you could expand a little bit on the technical assistance that is anticipated to accompany this large funding amount and where individuals may be able to look to identify technical assistance providers.
We are still standing that program up. In fact, I had conversations with our folks at AMS today who are building up that program. What we anticipate is at some point as we start to as these programs become public, we will also announce the availability of technical assistance providers regionally. That's our hope, at least at some level. But we understand that this type of technical assistance is a little more intensive than the type of technical assistance demanded in a lot of the programs. And so we're going to take some time to get it right. And so be patient with us there. Dr. Neal's putting some information in the chat there. I don't know if others can see that, but Kelsey, if you could share that with the group. But I think that the key is to be on the lookout for the technical assistance as it rolls out. I can't be more specific than that yet. Dr. Neal, perhaps you can.
Yeah, just on the lookout. Again, this is why it's important to go to usda.gov/meet, sign up for the update so that as soon as that information is available, you have the word on it. But it is coming soon, and so we very much appreciate your interest.
Thank you very much for that. From a tribal leader standpoint, is there any way to be able to communicate if we end up seeing that this program is not actually reaching out there into Indian country the way that we're hoping that it would? Is there maybe a resource hotline or somebody directly that you would recommend we reach out to?
Call me, Marty Matlock, marty.matlock@usda.gov, and we will pay attention instantly. And it's the same way with all of our underserved communities. We recognize that this is one of the big impacts we can have here is to try to bring opportunities to communities that have been left out too many times. So Black producers and processors, Hispanic. So we understand that, and we understand, and so we are attentive to it, and we just need to know how to engage, because it's a big country, and it's a very complex set of, even if you're just working with tribes, well, there are only over 550 of us. So I'm a member of the Cherokee Nation, those of you who didn't know, and worked with the Cherokee Nation Environmental Program for 16 years. So I can tell you, I understand the complexity of this and the necessity of it. Our tribal communities can be leaders in this space and already are in many regions. So, and we are aware of that across USDA. And so we're trying to amplify those opportunities for investment.
If I could add to, absolutely feel free to reach out to Marty Matlock. Feel free also to reach out to the program leads. We want to be very attentive to that as well. As I mentioned, we're developing programs. I actually have a request in now to our Office of Tribal Relations on some language to make sure that it's not unintentionally excluding tribes from competing in a particular program that we're working to stand up right now. We did the same thing with regard to the food supply chain loan. I know my colleagues at the marketing regulatory programs are doing similar kinds of things as they stand up their programs. So we definitely want to hear from you. Marty's a great place, not to say don't call him, but we want to know too, to make sure that we correct those things, because that is absolutely not the intention.
Make your voices heard, and that means speaking to many people. Absolutely agree with that. And I have to assert that one of the challenges many of our underrepresented, underserved communities have is they just don't know about what's going on because of the history of disengagement. Again, I grew up in Indian country, and I can tell you we were not attuned to USDA programs in rural Indian country because they just didn't serve us in my youth or my parents or their grandparents. And so here's an opportunity for us to tell the story, to get the word out to those who otherwise may not be aware that these opportunities are coming. So please do spread the word.
Thank you both so much for that feedback and your receptivity to feedback. We have one question that just came in. Will there be a set aside for Indian country so that our proposals are not marginalized? It might be indirect competition. Will the multi-million dollars be well-financed proposals? So kind of a two-part question there, I think.
Yeah, it's a good. That. Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Marty.
No, it is a darn good question because this is hard to try to make sure we serve the whole spectrum of needs out there. And there's a whole spectrum of needs. Karama spent her career sorting this out. So I'll shut up and listen and learn.
I haven't spent quite at USDA, but I will say I've just been here since April. But I will say in that time, and as we stood up these programs, as we're standing up the programs, this is absolutely something we're paying attention to. There are places where we can do that. There are places where it might show up in the context of, say, a priority points, those kinds of things to make programs more competitive, potential applications, I should say, more competitive. So it is something we're paying attention to. As I mentioned, we're in touch with our Office of Tribal Relations and others to get input on these kinds of issues. And where we can, we certainly are doing that. Again, as the programs come out, you'll see additional information that you can refer to there.
But you have had a career of helping communities and helping folks and finding people who have needs and solving them. That's what I meant. Yes. Oh, boy, have you done it too, done it well. So.
Thank you for that. I think we will do one last call for any questions from the participants that are joining us for this afternoon's webinar. You can utilize the chat window or the Q&A feature. As I see them come in, I will make sure and raise them to our panelists. All right, we have another question coming in. We have to compete with the big five who monopolize the beef market. How will we be able to provide meat to our schools, etc.?
Maybe I'll just start. And again, my piece is going to be a little bit narrow here, but only because we only have one program that we can talk about explicitly. But with regard to the Food Supply Chain Guaranteed Loan Program, as an example, and this is explicit in the notice, and you can see that when you go to that website and pull up the notice. I think we have the big four, but the big four are not allowed to participate as borrowers. And that is specifically, we opened this up, Marty opened this up with talking about competition. This work that we're talking about is in part in response to the executive order on competition, the executive order on supply chain. And so, that is very intentional. That in this case, the big four are excluded from participating as borrowers in the food supply chain guarantee. And I will say we're having very similar conversations, again, in line with those executive orders as we stand up additional programs.
Let me just chime in to Dr. Neal and say that there is one other executive order that impacts this, and that's the executive order on equity. And so to your comment on the big four, the big five, the big four, part of the justification behind this program, I think, was exposed when we had the pandemic, and we saw some of the problems that occurred from having a very limited, robust, competitive meat industry. And so to back up Dr. Neal's comments, this is an attempt to make sure that our meat and poultry processing facilities are a little more equitable and involve a few more customers that can help shore up some deficiencies that were exposed during that pandemic.
Absolutely. And I will say that the procurement side of it is something we're paying attention to as well. We understand that that federal procurement, especially for public schools and for other institutional markets, is an incredibly lucrative pathway for a processor. But it's not an easy pathway to get. It's competitive, but we understand that it also represents an opportunity. We don't know how yet that opportunity will manifest. So we need to hear from you. We need to know how we can make it better for you as you see these opportunities. But, you know, goodness, we're seeing on the news about every third night a school that's serving bologna because they don't have any other protein because of supply chain disruptions here or there, and it just cascades through. So yes, these are important issues, and they have the big four in beef, and I think it is a big 5 or 6 in poultry or in pork. And I think they're about 7 in poultry. They're a little smaller companies, but they're still dominant. Those are the ones driving the markets, and you can get a lot of meat cheap that way, but it's not so good for rural prosperity. It's not so good for the consumers when there's a disruption there, and that's where we got to be more competitive. I'm stalling here, so you'll ask more questions. Can't you tell? Kind of, what do they do? Stall. Yes. So if you guys don't have any more questions, I know you have plenty of things to do today, but if you do, ask them now or follow up with us.
Thank you guys so much for your willingness to take the questions. I am seeing a few comments in the chat where there's expectations to follow up directly with you as well too. So
yeah, I'll take this one on from Bill.
Okay.
Would USDA officials be willing to visit rural Montana, North Dakota, Wyoming to see disparity of beef production with beef processing? Absolutely, we are doing that. In fact, the Undersecretary for Marketing and Regulatory Programs was at a meat processing facility this weekend in California. You could think California's not a processing desert. It is in some places. So, I mean, we've worked with folks in south coastal Texas, you know, down in the Kings Ranch country, who are having trouble getting their meat processed. This is like the iconic American ranch land, getting their meat processed, because even if you have to haul it to Amarillo, that's a 6-8 hour truck drive. So it's a big country. This notion that you can have 5 or 6 facilities for beef scattered up in the Intermountain West, and that covers the country, it causes all sorts of dilemmas. And so we understand that's a weakness in the supply chain. And so a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And so what we want to do is have many chains here. And that's the way you strengthen the whole system.
Just echo that, and if I could add to, you know, I absolutely want to be involved in that. Actually, was in a meeting earlier today where a principal was talking about a trip that they had coming to Montana. So, you know, these kinds of trips are very much in process and in play, and we want to learn from them. I should also say that, you know, part of a lot of this work that we're talking about here is very much informed by a request for information that we had open this summer, or last summer in 2021, where we asked folks specific questions about meat and poultry processing, what their needs were, what the financing needs were, how USDA can help. And so the programs that you're seeing us talk about now, the programs that you will see us talk about in the coming months, are very much informed by that. I'm not suggesting that's everything, but I do want to make sure that it's clear that we are taking and very much want to take in input from around the country, as Dr. Matlock said, to inform the development of these programs and ensure they're effective and doing what it is we want them to do. We all want them.
So Bill, if I come to Montana, you have to come to the Ozarks, because let me tell you, it is beautiful here. And the only deal is it's 55 degrees out there today. You know, global warming is not going to be bad for everybody, but I don't know what it is in Montana, but I don't think it's 55 degrees in Montana today.
Well, I know it's not quite 55 in South Dakota, so.
I'm scared to ask.
It has been relatively warm for February, though. I will share that.
Yeah, but the storm's coming.
Yep, it is. Great. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions rolling in on our end. If there are any additional questions, again, we have shared the contact information for how you can communicate questions with our amazing panelists for today. You can also reach directly out to us here at the Intertribal Agriculture Council, and we're happy to help facilitate that conversation. We'll continue to have our finger on the pulse of how these things start to develop. And I think that, especially after a little bit of time to really process the great information that you all shared with us today, it would be tremendous to be able to host you again for some updates down the road if you are open to doing that.
Oh, you know we are. You guys are incredible hosts, and you serve a critical community in our country. And so, yes, absolutely.
Wonderful. It's so great to hear that. Well, with that, thank you all for joining us and sharing your expertise, and thank you for the work that you do day in and day out to help us address the shortcomings in our food systems. We look forward to working together over the next couple of years to help to bring healthier foods back into our rural communities and beyond. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.